Welcome to the Climate Hive Show. What do you solve? Where we chat with global game changers in climate. My name is Kevin Trolet, aka Kedro, and I am joined by my Climate Hive co-founder and co-host Mike Higgins, aka Higo. Today, our brilliant guest is Alicia Eastman, co-founder and board director of Intercontinental Energy and managing director of APC Impact Investment Fund. Alicia is also the co-host of the popular podcast Everything About Hydrogen. Make sure to check in the links and have a listen. We are going to be learning a lot about green hydrogen today from a real expert, so prepare to have your minds expanded. Alicia, so thanks so much for being part of the show, and I'm going to throw the first question out to you today and ask, what do you solve?
Hopefully I solved a number of things, but what I started off with is essentially global warming. That was the original intent for a company that I co-founded 11 years ago called Intercontinental Energy. And I would narrow it further to what we really were trying to solve was the intermittency with renewables, because that was a real issue. People were unwilling to have so many renewables on their grid. And we thought, okay, they become very cheap in certain places, but those places don't really have a lot of industry or consumers around them. So we have to find a way to get these very cheap electrons to the demand centers. And we also need to find a way for it to be like baseload power, for it to be reliable. Because if you use electricity for operating a facility, you never want to shut that facility down. It costs so much money to shut down and start up a facility again. So you can see where intermittent renewables would be a real problem. And the other solution that people are using is fossil fuels for the balance, or they're using batteries, which requires a lot of lithium. So we thought, let's look at this in a different direction. And my co-founder had been in renewables forever. I have been in private equity. I'd done renewables, but it wasn't the only thing. He really just ate and slept and drank it all day long. And he had realized that coastal deserts are the ideal place to put wind and solar farms, and ideally to put both together. Because a coastal desert pressure system creates sun all day long, very strong sun all day long, and then very strong wind at night. So you have that 24-hour coverage. So when the sun is down, you've got wind. And so we decided to set these up in the parts of the world where there was decent land, where there was a good jurisdiction, rule of law, where there were partners that we were comfortable with, that we already knew, or that we knew about. We had enough background that we could get to, and then of course enough land. So we looked around the world. We literally spun a globe and looked around the world at where we thought made the most sense, and then we went into the satellite maps and we saw who had the wind and who had the sun, and where they diurnal, where they're coming on at different times. And Oman was one of the just real bright spots. And then Australia, of course. So we now have 3 projects, 2 in Australia, 1 in Oman. And the smallest one is 25 gigawatts of upstream wind and solar, and then about half that in electrolysis. It's because we basically take, we decided in the beginning to use undersea cables. That was how we were going to get these green electrons to the demand centers. So if we put a facility, we put a big farm in Oman, then we do an undersea cable to Bombay. That was sort of the plan. And then, the cables are pretty expensive. You have to, build a new boat. The cables are much bigger than telecom cables. So it's a lot more difficult and expensive than telecom, which is what I was used to, and I anticipated it being closer to. And around the same time, we started to realize that we were never going to electrify everything. There's no way we're going to electrify everything in the world. We're going to need fuels. We're going to need green fuels. And our electrons are so cheap that we should be the ones making hydrogen. And then we can find a way to transport the hydrogen. It's much easier than the electrons. But hydrogen itself it's fine in a pipeline, and that's actually ideal because you can change the compression. So you can actually use the pipeline itself as storage. But also, if you turn it into ammonia, then you can transport twice the amount of power in a ship, and you don't have to keep it at a ridiculously low temperature. So if I wanted to ship hydrogen around the world, I would have to keep it at negative 253 degrees Celsius. With ammonia, it only has to be kept at negative 33 degrees Celsius or 10 bar pressure at ambient temperatures. So I'll tell you how we make how it sort of is made. You have the upstream wind and solar, and you use that to desalinate water. First thing, you take ocean water in. They're all on the coast, so we have ocean water. Take it in, we desalinate it. We make enough of that for electrolysis. Electrolysis is just dividing the hydrogen, dividing the water, which is H2O, into the H2 and the O. So you have hydrogen, you have oxygen. Then if you want to make ammonia, you basically just take nitrogen from the air. Our atmosphere is about 79, 80% nitrogen. So it's pretty easy to get. You combine it with the hydrogen and you get NH3, which is ammonia. So we do all of those things, and we are able to provide the green electrons locally. We can provide hydrogen locally for like iron ore beneficiation in Australia, or we can also export ammonia. So Singapore is expected to be the largest ammonia bunkering location. So we would be sending ammonia to Singapore, and then shipping companies would be picking it up. And also shipping companies would be picking it up to go to Japan, because Japan and Korea are going to be importing ammonia to use as hydrogen or to use as ammonia directly. So for things like power, you can co-fire a coal facility that was built only a couple of years ago, sadly, with you co-fire it with ammonia, and you've reduced the emissions in half. So, and then you want to get eventually to 100% ammonia, and then there's no emissions. So there's no need to have any emissions if you're using ammonia as your fuel. You do get NOx, but the solution to NOx is ammonia. So it works out pretty well. So we have been doing quite well. We have about 40,000 square kilometers of land total. We partnered with the traditional owners of the land in Australia directly. We were the first to really look at it like they're not a challenge. They're not the NIMBY kind of people that we need to get over. We went to them and we said, this would be great for you. We want you to be our partner. And we gave them a seat on the board. We gave them a stake in the company, and basically just the agreement of the charter that says that we won't do anything to their land that they don't agree to. And so they are very happy with that. It's going to be a big income stream, but also jobs. And it just doesn't defile the country the way that extractive mining does. You know, you have turbines only 5 kilometers apart. You can barely see 3 turbines at once because it's such a flat area. And you can do anything you want in between. So they can still have animals. And then one of the other things that's really interesting is that although we are in deserts, we have all this extra oxygen and water, and we can actually improve the topsoil underneath the PV. So underneath the solar, it gets shade. And so you can grow things as long as it has reliable shade. And so we can actually green the desert. We can have the benefits of that, but also be returning more topsoil to the land, have food security. I mean, just a lot of wonderful things that can happen for all the different companies and communities and people who will be building out around our projects. They're so large that they will attract industries to come there, and that's jobs and that's families. And they go forever. This is not a mining operation for 5 years where you have a pop-up economy that basically leaves the workers with nothing more than when they started. This is the forever projects that will create complex economies around them. So it's pretty exciting. Definitely, I might have gone too far here, but
yeah. Well, you knock the "what do you solve" question out of the park, I would say.
I'm still thinking of things, though.
It made me wish I had studied chemistry harder in high school. No, but it sounded to me, like at one point you decided to do a pivot, right? Where, you were going to distribute the electricity, right? But then you guys decided, let's go in the direction of electrolysis, right? It's the same outcome. It's just a lot less complex for distribution, right? You're not laying undersea cables and all those types of things. And then you solve the incredible refrigeration problem by saying, well, let's take it one step further and produce ammonia,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, so it just seems like you guys have been very nimble in your thinking and you're pivoting. And
Yeah.
again, now you get to the end of this and you're like, look, we've got water and air, we've got shade because of the solar arrays. So we can also now impact soil. So you've got this big circular economy play going, right? Where you're
Exactly.
creating what could potentially become usable farmland in the desert with a
Yeah.
source of water, which is the problem, right? So
Yeah.
I'm blown away at this discovery process that you guys have gone through as you started over here and now you're over here. And then who knows what the future will bring.
Yes. I mean, there's just so many opportunities for
Mm,
synergies, and especially if we have these sort of port communities, you can have the waste heat from
mhm,
one type of industry is actually feeding into another. All
mhm.
of the circular economy things that you point to, like for instance, steel. Steel can use our hydrogen to make green steel. We can use their steel to do our own turbines. I mean, right now, when you ship turbines, you're essentially shipping air. They basically just roll steel and ship it. Whereas we could take the sheets, roll it ourselves, and make it on site, and then we're not wasting all that energy of shipping something, shipping
Mm.
air essentially. And we have IP around it, but we found a lot of ways to use the layout of our sites as storage. So the way that we lay out the sites actually really minimizes the need for any kind of batteries or backup, in the case of not enough sun or not enough wind. So it's really exciting. I mean, we've really found a way to use as little energy as possible to release as much energy as possible, and also have no emissions. I mean, that's the big one too. And we have found that we will be producing electrons for locally too. So it's really both.
Okay.
We
Hmm.
felt there was a pivot at the time too, and then as we got into it, we were like, well, actually, everybody that is going to build a dedicated facility for us to build equipment is going to need these green electrons. The electrolysis needs it, but also the desal needs it. The local community will need it, and that's the same
Right.
with the potable water. The potable water we have excess of that we can share, not just for greening and the food security, but also for consumers, for industry, for all kinds of uses. So I think it's really exciting. We're very excited about it.
Yeah, that's I mean it just sounds like win-win, and it brings, so for people that don't understand, and you are explaining green hydrogen, but it's essentially the process of getting hydrogen atoms through renewables and not through fossil fuels. But I think there's been some, at least as I understand it, like for hydrogen as a resource like this, transportation is more difficult to keep electrons. But can you talk about like bigger picture and help people understand sort of green hydrogen and where this can be really beneficial? Because it's not something I think that's commonly understood. Like I think solar and wind, easy, battery, okay, that makes sense, right? Some of these other things, they make sense to people, but I think green hydrogen generally is not really understood.
Well,
And
I
where do you
guess
think it's going?
one of the ways to think about it is currently most of our energy is in the form of a molecule. It's a fuel and it's oil. That is the majority of what we're using right now. And what they do with oil is they get the hydrogen is the energy that's in the oil. The carbon doesn't help you. There's nothing else in there that helps you. There's just a bunch of garbage that when you burn it gets emitted into the atmosphere. So
Hmm.
instead of taking oil and picking off pieces of it to make it into different petrochemicals or different, uses, we're taking hydrogen, which we get from water, and building it up into these different chemicals. So it's green all the way through. So there's no need for the carbon. There are some applications. People are mixing, say, for jet fuel. It's going to be a long time before we have a plane that can go long distance on any different type of fuel. I mean, Boeing might not ever have a plane. Like it's building a new plane is quite difficult. But it's definitely going to be 20, 25 years. So for them, they're really looking at synfuels, biofuels, but there's never enough of them. There's never enough biofuels. You need to have something that you can actually make. And the great thing about hydrogen and ammonia is that you can make it forever, because all you need is the wind, the sun, the sea, and the air. I mean, that's it. That you will never run out of these components. So that part of it makes you feel very secure that this is a sort of no regrets path to go down. Ammonia is easier, not just to transport, but you can actually burn it, but it's not very flammable. So it's not, which is funny because ammonium nitrate can make explosives, but ammonia on its own is not very flammable. So if you're storing it somewhere, it's safer to store it than even diesel or what we're used to. You can light a match; nothing's gonna happen, But in some ways, it's more difficult to store if it's stored as a gas and if there's a possible leakage. And ammonia actually is toxic. I mean, all the fuels are toxic, but ammonia can travel faster in the gaseous format, which is why we want to put it in the liquid format at its boiling point of negative 33 degrees Celsius. And then you solve some of these issues. But yeah, we thought we were pivoting, and then we ended up really just doing everything we can. I mean, just optimizing everything. I mean, we set out knowing that we have to be in the cheapest decile in the world in order to stay in this market and to make a difference and to build these industries and to build these markets. The use of hydrogen and ammonia instead of fossil fuels is most important in areas where they don't have other options. And that's hard to abate sectors. That's like shipping, that's long distance shipping. That's like, aviation, steel, a lot of different chemicals. These things have to be fuels. And, you can have nuclear, you can have hydro, but it's not everywhere. And nuclear is not coming on as quickly as people might think. And, we still haven't really tested out the next generation SMRs, these small modular reactors. So there are a lot of different options. But at the end of the day, we're never going to have a worldwide connected grid. That's not going to happen. So we know electricity cannot solve everything. And batteries are a very expensive way to store. So if you can find other ways to store, then it's better. So our eye has always been on the price to make it appealing to the customer so that they can actually take that leading edge position in the market and order the ammonia ship, order the ammonia engine. So I think that it's been really important, and we've turned out to made the right decision by country too, because Australia just announced a really positive program, $2 per kilogram of hydrogen subsidy. So we really are happy that we're in Australia, because there are a lot of other places, my home country, unfortunately included, that are going backwards, that are not going to be focusing on global warming. And so we're pretty happy with where we are, where the projects are in very supportive areas.
So, because one of the things is like, okay, it sounds very positive, amazing what you all are doing. Obviously, you're getting traction because you have a very successful, like Intercontinental Energy is very successful, and you've developed over the last 10 years to be a very, profitable and successful company. But like the broader market, like what does that look like over the next, 10 years, in your opinion, with green hydrogen? Like, how is it playing in? What are the roadblocks? What are the advances? Because I spent a lot of time with, batteries. Like it seemed like there's big demand for batteries. People are developing all kinds of chemistries for batteries. And they are destructive. Like lithium is destructive, it is expensive. There's all kinds of problems with its supply chain, etc. So what's the future look like over the next 10 years, in your opinion, or, for green hydrogen? How does that wade in? And what do you hope to happen too?
Well, I mean, our projects will hit FID before 2030. And our first customers are definitely going to be shipping and power in North Asia, potentially also shipping or green steel. In Australia, there's a big mining area called the Pilbara, and that's where our project is. So that mine, all of those mines need to be electrified, which is something we can help with. But also, you can use the hydrogen to do iron ore beneficiation, so that when Australia is shipping out their iron ore product, they've done a step that would be very dirty where they shipped it. So they've done it with the hydrogen. It's a very clean process. And they've also made what they're shipping out, like the ingots are smaller. So they're shipping out less product at a more at a higher level in the value chain, and they've done it in a clean way. So it's a real win for everyone, for the planet as well. And we're looking for things like that with all of our projects. And there's lots of partners. We haven't announced all of them, but we were talking to a lot of different people who are extremely interested. And just the scale of it, I mean, the first phase is the hardest always, because that has to bear the brunt of the infrastructure and lots of things that have to be put in place. But after that, you're really just like making pancakes. I mean, you're just duplicating, and that makes people feel very comfortable. And I think the other thing people don't seem to realize is that there is a benefit to renewables, versus fossil fuels, just from a practical perspective. Everyone thinks it's just for the environment, but actually there's other benefits. So, for instance, Ukraine. If Ukraine did not have district heating, did not have centralized heating and centralized energy, if they had microgrids with small renewables, it would be much harder to take out their energy system. But as it is, they had really big targets that were very easy to knock out. And if you are in any kind of energy reliant business, say like aviation, it can be very nerve-wracking. The cost of oil, as you know, goes up and down all the time, sometimes for a reason, sometimes not. And Cathay Pacific, they actually hedged their cost of oil, and then oil went down so far they almost went bankrupt because of the hedge. Like they thought they were doing this, very prudent activity to make sure that they would be okay, and if they ended up losing on that. And the good thing about renewables is for the next 25 years, you know your costs. You know exactly what your costs are going to be. You're in a very small band of what you can charge the off taker, and that's comforting. If you're planning something, it's very nice to know, to have that certainty and security. Sometimes the certainty and the security is more important than the price, because you know you're going to have it. And so I think it's appealing and for a lot of reasons. And I think that, it can help countries that don't currently have a lot of security for different things, help them to be self-reliant and to produce their own infrastructure, as well as, their own energy and also all the different products around that. And it just allows more certainty about planning. And I think it's attractive to a lot of people for that reason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I put solar on my house, the number one reason was it was a hedge against energy inflation. It's a hedge, right? Because you look at the cost going up, and the cost is normal. Like once you buy, once you install it and you pay for it, you're basically done, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big motivator to put solar on the house, was just it fixed that cost. Now I know what it costs and it's done. Nice hedge. It also seems like with many things, we are, you're battling a little bit of the, perception, driving investments, right? Because, the EVs, the cars, they're basically lithium batteries, right? So that seems to be, what everybody thinks of when they think of EV, right? Not all these alternatives, and then you think about Toyota, right? Because I think Toyota they really made a bet with hydrogen, right? They really came out and said, we're going with hydrogen cell versus lithium, right? The market didn't absorb it, probably because of perception, but they pivoted, so they sort of moved away from consumer, moved into commercial, right?
Yeah.
My profound feeling is they'll be back, right?
Oh,
They'll
trucking. Like if you look at Volvo, which is trucking,
yeah,
the Volvo groups are different. The one that's called Volvo, it seems like it should be the bigger group, is actually just trucking, and that just trucking group is using hydrogen. BMW
right.
is using hydrogen. Lots of different car companies are using both because there's different applications. But certainly for
Hmm.
trucking, it makes a lot of sense, because you're on this sort of predictable route, so you can put few. You don't have to have so many filling stations, and
Right.
they're able to fill up and not have to wait around. And I mean, there's has to be faster charging for a lot of people to take on an electric car. Like I'm in London, I don't have
Right.
a garage, I don't have a driveway, I don't have a secure spot on the street. I mean, I don't have a car because I actually find it to be a hassle. I don't want to deal
Mm.
with the car, but because I'm in the city, it's fine. I don't need one. But there are a lot of places where I just don't see people driving and then going to the gas station and hanging out for 2 hours reading a magazine while their cars getting filled up. Like this, I don't see that. I
Me
think,
neither.
yeah. So, but it's also a very small element of the problem, right? So, if you look at just ThyssenKrupp steel facility, the one in Duisburg, that facility produces 4% of the pollution in Europe. In all of Europe, that one facility produces
Mm.
4%. So, these hard to abate sectors are just much larger, and there's just bigger fish to fry than personal cars. And I think the
That's right.
personal cars
Sure.
work well with electric if it works. And otherwise, then you have trucking that might make more sense with hydrogen. And there might be lots of other things that come around. Maybe we're swapping batteries. Maybe we're swapping hydrogen even. I've seen a couple companies that basically have a pack that you just sort of swap the fuel cell and in other ways. So maybe things like that will happen. I'm not sure. But we are very focused on the sort of hard to abate sectors, which there's not so much personal cars. It's more, trains, any type of shipping on land or in the sea, but not necessarily passenger focused sort of transport.
Makes sense. It really does. Yeah. I would like to see Toyota come back around with that alternative to lithium, though, because I want there to be a bigger solution set than just one,
Yeah.
for consumer transportation. And you nailed it. I think the recharging, the refueling is the biggest problem, and it's a real problem
Yeah.
when you.
I mean, Kawasaki is really big into liquid hydrogen, and they're the motorcycle people. They could very well introduce something that's great for Asia that's using hydrogen, not ammonia. Ammonia maybe for storage, but hydrogen will actually be used for energy. And I mean, there's just all the markets are so different. I mean, we
Yeah.
think about the market in the United States, yeah, okay, everybody has a garage. They can throw a battery up on the wall. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. They're only commuting. They're not doing really long distances. So
Hmm.
it all makes more sense. But then there are a lot of cities and large population centers or very rural areas where it's not going to make sense. And so, we have to have a lot of options. And I really think almost everything needs to work in order for us to fight this. Like almost everything that people have in mind to do anything to reduce emissions is worth it. It's worth exploring and optimizing and just amplifying. So I really don't feel like I have any competition at all. I also want all of the hydrogen players to do well. I want them to follow some of the things that we've learned and to do bigger projects that will be less expensive and to, I mean, because I think that in order for an entire industry to shift, it's much easier if you hit critical mass, right? I mean, that is necessary. And our projects are so large, we can do that on our own, but it would be better and if it was more global and people were building bigger projects all around the world. And small projects work too. They can be for automobile fueling or for just one microgrid and industrial cluster. But in places like Europe, it's extremely built up. It's very hard to get approvals for almost anything. So it's hard to envision Europe producing enough hydrogen for itself just because of a lack of space. And so you are going to have these coastal deserts, I think, that will attract the industry and where they're going after these green electrons and also hydrogen. And then maybe you're sending something back to Europe in sort of an intermediate form good that is then finished in Europe, or the IP or all of the invention around it is from Europe. Like, we have to think more broadly about, is manufacturing really the only thing that matters? It's something that has always sort of bothered me, because whenever any country talks about jobs, especially the United States, only manufacturing jobs seem to matter. And you're like, but there's so many, like, China doesn't want to be manufacturing low end shit forever. That's not their goal. They would love to be in a position where they're just exporting services. But, they're making their way up the chain. We should be doing what we do best and be training people to do what we do best in whatever country, and let comparative advantage take care of the rest of it. Because we know we have a lot of talent, and we have a lot of great institutions and great academic centers, and and a lot of inventions. There's incredible things happening in Northern Europe, in Southern Europe. Spain was the fastest growing rich country last year. People don't realize that, but we have a lot of capability, and there's plenty of room for everyone to play, and plenty of ways that we in the OECD countries can partner with the non-OECD countries to help bring them up to our standard of living, basically, without them having to use coal or fossil fuels. Being able to use renewables from the start, to leapfrog that, and in some cases, it's a business that they might have the best resource, like Oman. Oman is not the strong, it's not the richest country. It's not the same as Saudi and UAE. It's relatively poor, and having the best hydrogen location is really amazing. They can turn a lot of things around for people and provide jobs that are not necessarily manufacturing, but they're still jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had on the show a gentleman, Adil Orshad, who's EV Technologies, but we learned from him that gas stations in Oman, I guess by law, are required to have EV charging stations. And I think, the information that's out there, both on what's possible, what's happening, and where things are happening, is so, like, it's funny because there's so much information, but there's just so much lack of information that people have. So you think about the Middle East, and people aren't thinking about renewable energy and the greening and these kinds of things, or innovation going on, or these, any of that stuff. And what I hear from you, because it's funny, I wanted to ask you, like, hey, Lisa, what was your aha moment? But I feel like you've given me so many aha moments just in your talk so far. Clearly there's a lot, and probably you're constantly having aha moments because you're creating lots of cool stuff. And I'm also hearing this sort of like everything everywhere all at once approach versus like, this is the thing that's going to do it, or this is the thing that's going to do it.
Right.
And which does lend itself to kind of how things need to work. Biodiversity, things need to be allowed to flower, and then figure out what's solving what problem best where, and how people can do that versus getting siloed in, or these kinds of things. But I did want to ask you, like, so sometimes the world, and I think for our listeners, one of the things we're trying to do is give them a little bit of, let's say, scientific hope, in the sense of, like, let's give them, people, there's great people doing amazing things like yourself, but what gives you, sense of hope, and drives you forward in terms of looking at this climate crisis and where we're at, and hopefully where we need to go?
Well, I think that it's not just a climate crisis. I mean, it's also an ESG crisis. It's not just climate. It's a lot of different areas that have sort of been going backwards in the last couple of years, and really need to be pushed forward. So when I see that Norges Bank has 1.7 trillion under management, and 96% of that portfolio is going to have to be future proofed for global warming, and they're saying that, that makes me very hopeful. That there are a lot of still sovereign wealth funds and banks that are really going to go move forward with what the right thing to do. And that sort of really makes me feel comfortable. I also have seen, Saudi is with Aqua is one of the biggest producers of renewable energy, and UAE with Masdar. Like, these two countries are considered fossil fuel countries, and people were so upset that COP was held in Dubai. Dubai has no oil, by the way, but also they are also innovators in green energy, and they're really focused on it and really dedicated to it, and they're doing a lot. So I think I think that gives me hope. Just, all of Europe is sort of still hanging in. Canada is doing a lot of interesting things. Africa, Latin America, Asia, China is doing amazing things. So I think that sort of gives me hope. I guess one of the aha things for me, though, it was recently, was just that, okay, we have our projects and they're going forward in this linear fashion, and now we know exactly what we're going to do. I get kind of bored because I'm like, I want a problem to solve. Like, we had a problem and we're solving it. And so, but I want like something more difficult. And one of the things that I had realized when we're talking about the different markets and the acceptance of different technologies is it's a lot easier to sell a green fuel to replace a dirty fuel if you can also find a way for them to use less fuel. And what is much, much better than a green molecule is no molecule. So how do we find ways to be more frugal with the way that we use energy? Because we are wasting it all over the place. And there's lots of different optimization strategies that we can have to reduce energy use by so much. I mean, I'll give a Ukrainian example again, but in Ukraine, 50% of the energy used by the hospitals was for lighting. And so they're like, they want generators, they want diesel, they need backup, they have no energy. But actually, we got a $6 million just grant from Europe of LED lights, switch all the lights to LED, and half of their requirement for energy is knocked out. Half. Wow. Just by switching the lights. I mean, there's so many ways we can do this, and it requires working together. And one of the reasons I think our projects have done well and we've got good partners and everything's moving forward so quickly is that we've really been like camping out with the market. Like, I've been to every shipping event that's in the past 5 years. I've learned an industry that I didn't know that much about before, and you just learn how it works and what people are normally irritated by, and how do you solve that problem, and you sell a green fuel so that their sort of total cost of ownership is better. They're standing in a much better situation. They don't feel like they've sacrificed anything because you found a way for them to do what they need to do in a more efficient way. And so that's one of the reasons I set up my company, APC Investors, because I'd like to invest across the spectrum of solutions, some of them being optimization solutions. Some of them might not be energy or a different type of energy or storage. It can also be just ways that we use less, but get the same result. So we have growth, and it's also green.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about your APC, like the investment company, and what you're working on there? And
Sure. So APC stands for Agile Purposeful Capital, and
your
there
logo
is a
is
certain
the Black Panther, right? Like,
yeah, that's just my like sort of spirit animal. I don't I don't know if they call that cultural appropriation, but I am 15% Native American, so I'm going to claim that the panther. The female hunts too, so it's accurate. No, we are really focused on anything that helps with decarbonization, that helps with global warming. Definitely, there's a lot of different things that we're doing that will use less energy to perform the same task, and also different types of solutions just for different industries. One of the ones I've invested in recently that I've been really excited about is a semiconductor company, and they have technology that uses 40% less energy. So the actual fab to produce the semiconductors uses 40% less energy, and the rest they use is hydrogen. And they also use hydrogen instead of the 10,000-year chemicals that they use now, and our emissions going into our atmosphere. So it's a big improvement, in terms of energy use. The chips themselves have a nanotechnology and ceramic technology that makes them lighter, less latency, a lot of big benefits. So Moore's law is definitely not dead. We are now going to be making semiconductors and chips at a much lower price, at a much lower impact on the environment, as a net zero impact on the environment. And it's not going to be in Taiwan, it's not going to be in the US, it's not going to be in China. So we will be in different areas to provide diversification to the market so that one country cannot dominate, and we don't make ourselves a target for semiconductors. I mean, it's obviously not ideal that Taiwan has almost all the semiconductor capability, and then the US has some, but they have a lot of restrictions on selling to other markets. So there are other markets that are going to need them. And we also, that company also has a service they can do for data centers. Data is becoming a bigger and bigger problem about energy usage. It's really huge and it's growing. And with quantum and AI, there are always ways to make it cheaper, but it's still growing. Even if we were just keeping these email accounts for 20 years, it's still growing and is taking a lot of energy. So how to optimize that is really important. So I'm looking at that around that space a lot, and working with data centers to see like what we can do or what a company could do to make life easier for them and lower the bills and lower the impact on the climate, the negative impact.
And can you tell us the name of this company, or is that not?
Again, it's called ChipX.
Yeah. ChipX.
And they're at chipxglobal.com.
I want to keep an eye on them.
I refuse to have a .ai URL. I'm like, you guys need to think a little long term. You can't have .ai forever. .com I think is better.
And with ChipX Global, are they just getting started, standing up? Are they developing early prototypes, or are they out in the marketplace, like swinging for the fences?
They're past TRL 9, so they're basically commercializing. So it's technology transfer. They've been working on it for a number of years. The team comes from Taiwan, Japan, with 50 years experience making semiconductors, and also India. And we're located right now in Wales, in what is a semiconductor valley in the UK. So there's different benefits for R&D programs, but also it's a center that wants to focus on semiconductors. So so the team is in a lot of different places, but everyone has worked together before in some way. So it's a very comfortable team, and we will definitely be in a number of countries to help diversify this. And I think that geopolitically, this is a really helpful move too, in addition to the environment.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. Well, what an amazing conversation this has been, Alicia. Like, just trying to keep up with all this stuff that you can just say so easily. It's like, wow. I mean, you guys have really cracked the code on leveraging renewable energies to develop and drive a very interesting circular economy, right? Where you're very quick to pivot. You guys got your heads on a swivel. You're looking at all kinds of places to be impactful, and not only thinking about how to sell more of an energy resource that you develop, but how to actually encourage people to use less. So it's not just a message about, let me make energy cheaper. It's like, well, why don't we begin with, why are we using so much energy in the first place? Right. So, because like you said, and I really like that, the best molecule is no molecule, right? Why don't we start with that as an endpoint, right? And see what we've done. So I've learned a lot listening to you. I really appreciate your insights and your energy and your enthusiasm. I'm so glad you're doing this. We're going to benefit enormously from it. I'm going to keep an eye on SIPX Global. Love what you're doing.
Definitely.
Kevin, anything to throw in there?
No, I just want to thank you so much, Alicia. I think we absolutely will have to have another conversation, and I have so many more questions for you. Honestly, just it's been kind of real privilege to talk to somebody who, like yourself, and you're very dedicated. It's like you've worked very hard to sort of get your hands around what you're getting your hands around, and I think we appreciate that. And I think we appreciate that also from the standpoint of we love talking to people like yourself that are so smart and working on like really important problems. It gives us, a lot of hope, for what can be. So thank you for being part of the show.
Well, I think much like you guys, when you're doing something that you think is valuable, it's pretty easy to wake up in the morning and jump on it because it's very fulfilling. And I wish there was a way to teach that to more people, that it's not about the buck so much as it is about, making a difference and how that, how it makes you feel to spend your time that way. I think it's very rewarding. So thanks for having me on too. And hopefully people learned a little bit more about hydrogen, although